Welcome to Module 13. This is the last module as we look at human development, and this module covers adulthood. There are three stages of adulthood that we typically recognize. Early adulthood is roughly your 20s through your 30s. Middle adulthood is to age 65, and late adulthood is your years after age 65. People vary widely in their physical, psychological, and social development with each of these stages. And if we look at the age ranges, the 20s and 30s, the 20s and 30s actually are still in the intimacy versus isolation stage, versus middle adulthood to age 65, when generativity versus stagnation, the next stage in Erikson's theory, is technically thought not to begin till the 40s. So technically we spend quite a bit of time in intimacy versus isolation from our teenage years through middle adulthood. Physical development and the physical changes that occur in middle adulthood. Early adulthood is marked by muscular strength, reaction time, sensory keenness, and cardiac output peak in our mid-20s. Middle adulthood includes physical vigor more closely linked to health and exercise habits than age. Our physical decline is very gradual, and there's a gradual decline in fertility. Females experience menopause, the time of natural cessation of their menstruation, and the biological changes a woman experiences as their ability to reproduce declines. And most of us have probably know that women who have babies or become pregnant in their 40s, those pregnancies are a little more higher risk than if they happen in the 20s and 30s. Males experience a gradual decline in sperm count, testosterone level, and the erection and ejaculation speed. In addition, some other changes occur, including our sensory ability, strength, and stamina. Our visual sharpness, our distance perception, and stamina diminish. Our pupils shrink and the lens becomes less transparent. Our health also takes a turn, and again, a lot of this, as mentioned on the previous slide, is related to our diet and our exercise as we become adults and move into middle and to late adulthood. But overall, our immune system does weaken, and it makes us more susceptible to life-threatening disease. People over 65 suffer fewer short-term ailments. The aging brain, our neural processing lag occurs. Brain regions related to memory begin to atrophy. Inhibition control from frontal lobes may decline, and there's a leading to blunt questions and comments. And the last part is about exercise and aging. You know, the exercise can slow our aging, and it stimulates brain cell development and neural connections. It aids our memory by promoting neurogenesis and helps maintain telomeres, or the tips of the chromosomes. These are actually the things that continually to actually divide, and as we start to age, their division stops, and that is what actually helps accelerate the aging process in humans. So how does our memory change as we age? In early adulthood, it's a peak time for some types of learning and remembering. In middle adulthood, it shows greater decline in the ability to recall rather than recognize memory. And in late adulthood, it's characterized by a better retention of meaningful than meaningless information. It's a rich web of existing knowledge that will help us retain that information and a longer word and information production time. But funny stories, I have a aunt in my family who seems to go through every single person's name in the family before they get to you when they're trying to address you. And we all laugh about it, but actually it does related to some of the recall decline that's mentioned for middle adulthood. So how do we sustain our mental abilities? How can we not let the effects of aging actually impact our cognitive development, our cognitive functioning? Developmental researchers studied age-related changes such as in memory with cross-sectional studies comparing people of different ages, and longitudinal studies retesting the same people over a period of years. Age is less a predictor of memory and intelligence than is proximity to death. As death approaches, cognitive decline typically accelerates, and this is referred to as terminal decline. So what themes and influences mark our social journey from early adulthood to death. What is the social development like in someone who is an adult? We often talk about the midlife transitions. Also, sometimes when people say this is a midlife crisis, this usually occurs in the early 40s when people realize that life will soon be mostly behind them instead of ahead of them. The social clock is the culturally preferred timing of social events such as marriage, parenthood, and retirement. This clock varies from era to era and culture to culture, and also within cultures, including specific subgroups. For the 1 in 4 adults who report experiencing a life crisis, the trigger is not age, but rather a major event such as illness, divorce, or a job loss. Chance events have lasting impacts, deflecting us down one road rather than another, and we might be able to look at individuals, unfortunately, who've been affected by the hurricanes that have hit different parts of the U.S. to understand what that specific event, which could be a chance event, in some cases, even though we knew it was coming, that may change their path from what it was typically going to be prior to that event. Love is a big part of our adulthood. Adult bonds of love are most enduring when sealed with commitment, such as a marriage or civil union, with satisfaction related to shared interests and values, and mutual emotional and material support and self-disclosure. Marriage is also predictive of happiness, sexual satisfaction, income, and physical and mental health. Compared with their counterparts of 30 years ago, people in Western countries are better educated and marrying later. And this may help explain why the American divorce rate, which surged from 1960 to 1980, has since leveled off, and it's even slightly declined in some areas. Trial marriages, which are related to higher rates of divorce and marital dysfunction. More and more people tend to be meeting their partners online. Work is also a big part of our lives as adults. I'm an organizational psychologist by education, and I study how psychology and work kind of fit together. And one of the things we talk about for work is it provides a sense of competence, accomplishment, and self-definition for many of us. Who are you often depends a great deal upon the answer to what do you do. And few students in their first years of college or university can really predict their later careers. There's also research that shows that most of us will have more than one career in our working lifetime, which is actually, I think, very exciting, since most of us, or all of us, are multi-talented, multifaceted individuals who will do well in multiple types of careers. I do think it's important to actually think about how you would, from this point forward, put together a loosely planned career timeline. Because happiness is about having work that fits your interests and about what you can be proud. And I think another way to also say that is a lot of us find our work and a meaning of work and satisfaction when we know that we are using our skills and abilities in a meaningful way, and we know that we are impacting or having an impact either on the lives of others or in a specific field. So how does our well-being change across the lifespan? Positive feelings grow after midlife and negative feelings decline. Older adults report less anger, stress, and worry and have fewer social relationship problems. Brainwave reactions to negative images diminish with age. At all ages, people are happiest when they are not alone. Now that is true on average, but we also realize that individuals such as introverts still need companionship, but they tend to not have large social circles, either as a teenager or an adult. And it does not really mean that because they do not have those social circles that they are not happy, but they probably will have less of that as an introvert versus an extrovert. So throughout the course and throughout psychology, we look at 3 different things that impact what happens as we develop as a human and as we function. We look at our biological influences, our psychological influences, and the social cultural influences. All 3 of these can help promote well-being and successful aging. In the biological influences, we talk about no genetic predisposition to early cognitive or physical decline, having appropriate nutrition or access to nutrition. In the psychological influences, we talk about individuals may have an optimistic outlook, and they have a physically and mentally active lifestyle. And my recommendation to each of you is to read, and do it in short bursts. I read a lot of books. I can't read for a long time. I read maybe 5 pages to 10 pages at the most in books. But I think reading is actually one of the things that helps keep our minds active as we start to experience some of the cognitive declines that come with our advancing chronological age. And social cultural influences, support from family and friends, the cultural respect for aging, depending how it's viewed in that particular culture or subgroup, and also experiencing safe living. A loved one's death triggers what range of reactions? As we advance in age, we realize that unfortunately death will become more and more a part of the experience we have through the end of middle adulthood into later adulthood. Most of us will suffer and cope with the deaths of relatives and friends. For most people, the most difficult separation is the death of a spouse, a loss suffered by 4 times more women than men. Grief is severe when a loved one's death comes suddenly and before it is expected time, or its expected time on the social clock. Grief reactions will vary by culture and individuals within cultures. And I think if you look at the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, if you self-reflect on maybe a loss you realize someone experienced in your family or you personally experienced, you can see, depending on the circumstances of that person's particular passing, that those stages probably varied in terms of timing and intensity as you experience, unfortunately, that loss, or the person experienced that loss. That brings us to the end of Module 13, and this is actually the end of human development. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I would just make sure that you recommend to review the PowerPoint and review the modules for 12 and 13 for our third quiz, which will be this week.